Друзья, всем привет, с вами Алексей. Продолжаем изучать язык Python. В предыдущем уроке установили Python. Ну, продолжим знакомиться.
Add Python to path option basically that you see here, because by default it is unchecked and you have to check mark it so that after the installation you'll be able to execute Python commands in your terminal. Now, an interesting note here, if you're using macOS, like I do, is that by default on macOS there is Python already installed. So if I do Python version and execute, I see that Python version 2.7.10 is installed. And that is actually Python that macOS, the operating system itself, is using. However, for our tutorial and generally when working with Python, we want to be using the newest version, which is Python 3. So we're going to leave that default Python installation alone. We're not going to use that or touch that. And instead, we're going to be using the Python version 3 that we just installed locally. So now if I clean this up and we want to execute Python version 3 commands, we're going to do Python 3 instead and -- version, and that will give us the version. So that's how we can differentiate between the already installed Python and the newest version that we just installed. So just be aware of that difference. Now that we have Python available locally, it's time to download a code editor for Python, because we're going to be writing files with Python code, so we need a proper editor for writing Python code. And actually the best Python code editor available out there currently is PyCharm, which is from JetBrains. So that's what we're going to be using throughout our tutorial. So let's go to PyCharm. It is an intelligent code editor, which makes it much easier to write code. So it makes you actually very productive when writing code, and we will see why throughout the course. As you can see, there are two versions. We have the community version and professional one. Community version is free and already has a lot of powerful features, but the professional edition gives you additional very useful features, especially if you're creating web applications or scientific projects in Python. So with professional version, additionally, you will get scientific tools that you can use in scientific projects with Python. But also you get support for Python, web frameworks, and database integration, which can be, of course, very helpful if you're developing web applications. If you want to get the professional edition, JetBrains actually provided me with a code for my channel to try it out for 3 months for free. Just use my code when you install it. But for this demo, community version is absolutely fine. So I will go with this one and install it. And just click download. And once the PyCharm installer is fully downloaded, we can just click on it. Move it to the application. And now I can actually use it locally. So I'm just gonna open the application and we're gonna take a quick tour around PyCharm. It's actually pretty simple to set it up, and there you go, we have our PyCharm, and we can now create a new project, and let's call it My Python Project, and that's it. Basically, we don't need to change anything else. And here you see the location basically of where this application folder will be created. You see PyCharm projects folder got created in my users directory. So this is basically very convenient because all my PyCharm projects or my Python projects that I create using PyCharm will be created in one location. And here you also see that Python version 3 that we installed is automatically being used for this project, which is exactly what we want. And you see it says base interpreter, and Python interpreter is basically a program that knows how to execute Python code. It will know how to interpret or translate our Python code into instructions that computer can understand. So with this configuration, we don't have to change anything. We're gonna create our project. So first of all, I'm going to make all of this a little bit bigger so that you can see the menu here on the side and the code a little bit better. So in preferences, editor, font, we're gonna set the size to 20. If I apply this right here, you see that this code editor font basically got bigger. And I also want to increase the size of this menu font here. So in appearance, I'm going to set it to maybe 18, and there you go. So basically everything is bigger now, so you can follow along and see exactly what I'm typing. And also another note here, if you want to configure your theme, basically, so if you don't want it to be dark, or maybe you want some other color scheme, then you can select it here in appearance. You have 4 themes available. Let's actually try this one out and apply. And there you go, you have a different theme. I actually prefer this one, so let's leave it at that. So as you see, we have a very simple project with one main.py file. The extension is for Python files, which basically contains very simple code. And we're gonna basically just remove all of these and start from a clean Python file state. And in the next section, we're gonna dive right in and write our first simple Python application. We're gonna start with the simplest example in Python to basically learn Python syntax and get started as simply as possible. So first of all, we're gonna write a very simple application that just prints some output. And in Python, when we want to print, basically display results of what we wrote, we use this syntax where we say print, and here we can pass in basically whatever we want to display. And now if I want to see whether this super simple application works, I can run it or execute it with this triangle here, and I have the output. So basically the output is displayed or printed right here, and I see the output is 1. I can display some other values like 200 and run it, and there you go. Let's say we want to display some text, basically whatever, some sentence, and again triangle, and we have that output here, right? So again, very simple example of writing Python code that basically displays some information when we execute it. One thing that I want to note here is you see that we write some code basically in this window right here, so in our main.py file, and when we run it or execute it, our code, we see some display in this window. So you may be wondering, what is this window and why do we see some output right here? The answer to that is that whenever you're working with tools like PyCharm, which basically have all the functionality that you need to write your code and then execute your code, you basically have everything in one place. So whatever we write, we can execute or run right away. Now, without such tool, how would we write code and how would we execute that code? And this will help you understand what's going on here. And to show that, I'm gonna go back to my terminal and I'm going to create a new file, and I'm gonna call it test.py. We're gonna write the same code basically in this file. You can do it in a file editor. I'm just doing it directly in the command line and save it. So now we have the same identical file as here, but not inside our code editor, right? Not inside this PyCharm tool. And we have Python 3 available.
Так, ну что тут пишемся? Пишемся. Ну все, 55. Ладно, ребята, всем пока, всем удачи.